talking about the passing of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, and with us in studio is SABC News politics editor Mzwandile Mbeje, who joins us live now. Mzwai, one of the things that, of course, we've seen cut across throughout the course of the day is the various messages of condolence that have been pouring in. But some of them, when you read them, there's a thread there. There's a thread of, unity. There's a thread of a sounding board. There's a thread of a loss of an elder who would have cut across all political lines.
Oh yes, in his latter days as a politician, I think he was seen as this statesman who was able to perhaps bring sanity. I mean, you'd remember his interventions in Parliament. So it would be understandable why that kind of a threat is coming. But of course, in the same vein, Bongewe, there is that reminder that so we shouldn't be selective if we are profiling the history of an individual like Dr. Buthelezi, because before this kind of posture that we now know, he has a history, he comes from somewhere, and then many other people do not agree with that history. So as we reflect on him, so I guess South Africans will want to know what exactly the type of man he was during his entire 95 years.
And I suppose it speaks to the mixed legacy then, Mzwai, because you listen to, for example, IFP leader Nkosini Hlabisa, who was in conversation with Vusikhumalo earlier on, seeing it as negative comments and saying that he's seen social media and he actually wishes people could refrain from such negative comments. But when one, looks at his history, like many political figures, his is a mixed legacy as well.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And you'd recall, not many people, obviously the younger ones, who haven't maybe done a lot of reading in terms of understanding our democracy, not many people would know that IFP almost did not participate in the elections of 1994. And some of the questions there is, what would have happened had that happened? Because clearly you could see the political tensions were very, very rife. And we had things like, what do you call, the march to Lutuli House. So all those things were associated with a political party somehow under, you call it the Zulu nation. So there was that intertwining. And that's why that legacy, you can't just profile Buthelezi in just one and not the other. So you've got to look at him in the proper context. And of course, I mean, as you have asked earlier, so in his latter days, I can tell you, I mean, many people really respected him. I think he was an elder, he gave wise counsel. But of course, in his earlier days, I think he was a bit more, slightly different, I would say.
And, talking about his earlier days, one of the things that also stands out is the ties that he at some point in the 80s had to cut with the ANC. And we then see KwaZulu-Natal becoming a battleground between the two political parties, and this then spills over to Johannesburg. And a lot of people do not isolate him from that particular part of history.
It's very difficult because as much as you would say it was, let's say, sometimes you'd say it's the Zulu nation because of, you remember the word izimfuno, those demands. So, but they were disguised somehow under the political cloth. So how do you cannot? And then when the consequence of fighting and death happens, people will easily point to that which is easily visible in front of their eyes. So that's why we are saying, yes, in black culture, we shouldn't speak ill of someone when he's passed on. But I think this is a politician who knows exactly what his legacy will be reflected upon. Yes, we'll talk about the good things. If there are bad things, we'll certainly reflect it, because ours is to bring to the fore that which we have witnessed, that which we have read, that which we have seen happen being done by the actors in our political space. He was a very prominent actor in our political space, a very key individual. But of course, we need to reflect him in totality.
And, especially when you think about that piece that Griselda did, for example, going back to Thokoza, which became one of the centers of this particular violence, that hostel. And some of those at the time who were there still remember things very vividly. So you cannot shy away from talking about that part. But there's also another key point, Mzwai, to his politics, if I may put it that way. And it's the role that he then comes and he plays significantly as the Prime Minister of the AmaZulu nation. And then a lot of people not sometimes able to separate him as the Prime Minister and the leader of the IFP.
I mean, if there's one thing that almost everyone agrees on, is that in terms of the standing of the Zulu nation, in terms of putting the Zulu nation on the map, he really played almost single-handedly a very big role there, culminating in the coronation of the current king. So he was the person who, I mean, remember, this is the person who has served 3 kings. And then his institutional memory, his position as an elder, and then of course his insight, because he also has royal blood. He's born of Princess Makoko. So that put him in a very good stead as well. And I think when there were ructions, when the late king passed on, so his role there will never be forgotten, particularly, even, we would speak about this, even those who didn't really agree with his politics, particularly in making sure that the current king is installed and is respected. I think, that is owed largely to him, almost single-handedly. Where
do we place their relationship now, though? Given what we're seeing in the public domain.
Okay, I said this thing earlier, Ebongiwe. There's a very nice Zulu expression, umbeki wenkosi kabusinayo. The one who crowns the king does not necessarily rule with the king. So I actually, when I saw that, I said, I am seeing this thing in practical terms. Remember, as much as we are speaking about Buthelezi, the traditional man here, Buthelezi was a politician. So some of the differences emanated from the political point of view. Remember, it was about the appointment of the chairperson of Ingonyama Trust. So if, as a politician, sometimes you would act as a traditional person, but your political biases somehow will come in. Because as a politician, he has particular interests. So if then he realized that those that are being installed and then politically are not necessarily aligned to what he felt, so he obviously was going to have an issue with that. But at the same time, when you remember, the king is the king, so he must decide what he wants. It doesn't matter that you help me to get to where I am. So I am here now. I am charting my own path. Sometimes my path may go into conflict with what you want and what you prefer. So that's why I use this expression that umbeki wenkosi akabusinayo.
And be that as it may, umbeki akabusinayo, Mzwai, but what kind of a gap does this leave then in the AmaZulu nation? And particularly some have said that his absence will be felt, and at the same time you then look at the current succession battle, because it's still a thing that we are talking about. And I wonder, what does it all mean then in that context?
I think perhaps the good thing that he has done is that, he will leave a very big void, particularly in this aspect. But the good thing that he has done is that everyone is clear who their king is. You must know the king is not only the king by just word, it's also the king by deed. Even when those ructions, those battles were still raging, so people, the generality of Zulu nation, voted with their feet to say, we understand there is this battle, but this is who we have chosen. So the fact that he has left them something to look up to, yes, there will be those court battles, but remember, you can't just be the king of yourself. You must be the king of the nation. The nation currently has decided. There are so many people who don't necessarily like the current king, but because they know that he is the one now on the throne, they have to follow him. So he has left that. So I think difficult as it is, and the void, as much as he has left the void, but people know what to do in the event something else happens.
And I mean, the other big question then becomes, the IFP.
Oh, yes.
His baby, as one would put it. And even when you think about the fact that even in 2023, there are still discussions about who do you put as a face of elections on the actual party T-shirts ahead of the elections. That tells you the significant role that he would have played in that particular political party. And I wonder, how do they begin to forge ahead?
You know, the most interesting aspect, Bongiwe, about actually today, one of the things as the team, SABC News team, we're going to cover today before the breaking of this news was the IFP branch, the IFP province here in Gauteng. You'd recall that a couple of weeks ago, the IFP was part of that group of the multi-party charter, that coalition towards 2024. So, but we've had voices emanating from the IFP which are opposed to this. One of the things we are gathering from that meeting that was going to happen today was that they were going to come out and say, we actually don't agree with this position. Already that tells you something. A couple of weeks ago, there were reports again that his leadership was challenged, but somehow he managed to pull through. So the fact that the IFP Youth Brigade is very clear that they don't support this charter, and then there are those provinces which are not happy, and there's some sort of a contest within his leadership. So it's going to be very, very difficult. And many people have said, in fact, I think I even heard the Professor Mngomezulu said that Buthelezi was the glue that still held the IFP together. It is going to be very curious for the political party, for the IFP going forward, because he's going to be challenged. Remember, many people did not want to come out very openly because he had the support, Hlabisa had the support of Buthelezi, and because of the respect they accorded him, even those who disagreed with Buthelezi would hold back.
Does it put him in a vulnerable position?
Somehow it does. Maybe not a vulnerable, not necessarily a vulnerable position, but it puts him in a position where he can be challenged.
Sure.
So, and it's going to be very, very interesting. I don't know whether they'll probably hold back maybe for the elections, which is roughly 7 months away. But beyond the elections, I think it will depend on how the IFP does. So the challenge to the leadership is definitely on. And
especially because you just think about this multi-party charter, which a lot of them spoke about, and they said this is the country's hope when it comes to doing things differently, a country being run differently post the 2024 elections. Now, if there is no agreement on that front, it also speaks of...
And especially because there's a bit of a contradiction, actually. I was speaking to my colleague as well, I think the international editor, Sophie Mkwena, earlier. We were just analyzing the charter versus the wishes of Buthelezi to lead, to die when he is back in the ANC or when he has reconciled with the ANC. Here is the governing party that the founder has said, work hard to make sure that you reconcile so that when I die peacefully. But then you go on and then you make those agreements. Particularly, one of the things they said in the declaration was that they ruled the ANC and the EFF out. So how do you then reconcile with this party that your founder had said, listen, this is the party that made me. Yes, somehow along the line we went our separate ways, but I would like this party to recognize me because I played a very crucial role. And then going to elections, you're going with people who want nothing to do with this party. I don't know how they're going to navigate that. Those are some of the issues that will probably start to pose challenge to his leadership to say, so what about reconciliation with the ANC when you have already declared that you are not going to work with the ANC? And then those would be the weak points that they can start using against him. So it's going to be very interesting. I know in the next few days or weeks, so they will hold hands, they will not talk. But remember, this is politics. At some point, it will express itself in politics is unforgiving.
And, you know, especially because earlier on, I was watching a conversation between Mxolisi Masango as well as Mahlengi Bengo from the ANC. And she was talking about this very issue, saying that there were talks as recent as a few weeks ago in this particular regard. She can't reveal much, of course, of what is being said behind closed doors. You listened to Hlabisa this afternoon speaking to Vusi Khumalo about this very issue, kind of signaling that, yes, there may be conversations, but non-committal on what becomes the agreement on the other side of this. And I suppose, as you say, this then puts the IFP voter as well in a very precarious position towards the election.
It's very, very, very difficult. And I guess, I don't know what sort of negotiations they will hold between now and the elections, the opposition parties versus the IFP and the ANC. Because if, let's say, the charter succeeds or the charter holds, the charter is clear, no EFF, no ANC. So, and then the ANC can legitimately ask a question. So why do you speak reconciliation here in public? You say you want nothing to do with me. So those issues will be quite interesting. And then post-elections, remember sometimes results do determine who you speak to. I think that's why they, as much as they agreed broadly, they couldn't commit, because elections will probably give us results which will force people to work with those they didn't think they will work with.
And it's going to be interesting then if the ACDP is vindicated, because they were saying you're putting the cart before the horse, so we're not going to be part of these conversations without knowing what's going on. But there's another relationship that I want us to touch on just as we end off, and that's his relationship with Princess Irene, his wife, and how all the time he signaled towards this inner strength, towards the support that he had within his home. And for him, it kind of made it simple to be able to do what he needed to do.
You know, I think sometimes it really, you know, helps to have someone who anchors. I mean, we can see you in public, but if you have an anchor, so it makes it so easy for you. So you can see that Princess Irene was the anchor of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, because he was able to do all that he achieved because he always knew there was the anchor. And then that anchor is, I mean, when you go astray, the anchor is always able to bring you into line.